You guys hear me okay online? Okay, good. I think sometimes there might be problems with maybe the AC going off. Issues, I'm not sure. Trying to make sure to record at least one of the sections, either the one that I just did or this one, and put it up online. The problem I'm having is I can access the video, but I don't know how to download it. I may have to do like a screen video shot on my computer. I feel like we needed a dry run of everything before the semester to make sure that we were okay, but it's, we'll forget about it. Get it to you somehow, some way. Share. You get that view. Cool. All right. Get a quick drink. Any questions before we start? Anything from the virtual gallery? All right. So today we'll cover most of chapter number 3. Then the quiz will be available on Friday. We'll finish this chapter up on Friday. And then start chapter number 4 on Friday as well. So a quick review of what we went over on Monday. So exercise science, a systems approach, chapter number 3. Ain't working. All right, so systems of the body respond to basically general stress. Overall, either physiological, physical, psychological. So physical activity, exercise, stress, the psychological type of stress, maybe some type of injury, stress, changes to nutrition, other things you might consume, extreme environmental conditions, and then any diseases that might develop. And this is all changing the homeostasis of the body. So that's the body's response to the change, is we sometimes maybe get a new homeostasis for that. But again, stress doesn't necessarily need to be a negative thing. In the case of physical activity and exercise, it's actually a good thing. Now, there are extreme cases where it can be too much, but it's still, in general, pretty good. So professionals need to have the knowledge of all the systems, where they're located, what the tissues are in the systems, what organs are involved, and also how they're integrated, how each one of the systems interact with one another. And then a nice big list of those systems. We're not going to cover all of these. A couple of them off the top of my head we're not going to go into. The urinary system, the reproductive system, we're not going to be talking about those. We'll go into most of these and at least touch on them. So the stuff from here, the systems here forward, or forward of this, are going to be what's on the quiz. So you don't need to know about the reproductive system or the urinary system. That won't be on a quiz. One thing that will be is the nervous system. Primary functions here, controlling everything in the body. Controlling every organ, every function that we have in some way, somehow. Primary component of this be the neuron, also known as the nerve cell, responding to acute changes within the body. Also, important considerations here would be the disease conditions are going to affect the connection between the brain and the tissues or the muscles. So it's going to affect how our bodies are going to react and if we can move our bodies in a voluntary sense. Also, controlling movements during sports and physical activity, obviously, because it helps control our movements during rest and just normal daily activities. But there's a special adaptation that can occur with the connection between the muscles and the brain, and that is known as neuromuscular adaptation. So within the first couple months of weight training, there's going to be an increase in strength, thus performance, but there's very little increase in muscle mass. And what's actually occurring is that connection, that signal is more synchronized, it's firing the right muscle fibers at the right time, and it's providing enough signal to fire the muscles. It's just better organized, it's more efficient. Change the view of the camera here. Oh, wrong way. That's probably better. All right. Then we went over the divisions of the nervous system. The big ones, got the nervous system, and then breaking it up into two, the central and the peripheral, the central being the brain and the spinal cord. The peripheral, you have the sensory, the motor. The sensory being the stuff that's coming in from the outside of the brain, basically. And that could be outside of the body, literally, or it could be inside of the body. Then on the motor, we have the autonomic and the somatic. Autonomic is automatic, just happens automatically. The higher portions of the brain control it. Parasympathetic and sympathetic is the divisions here. And parasympathetic was the rest and digest. Breathing rate is low, heart rate's low, resting levels. On the sympathetic side, heart rate's increased, blood pressure's increased, breathing rate's increased. But also we are decreasing our digestive rate. A lot of that has to do with the the blood being transported to different locations. During the parasympathetic, a lot of the blood is in the gut and in the brain, kind of the central portion of the body. Also in the urinary system as well to help regulate that. And we only have so much blood. So in the sympathetic, we are exercising or some type of physical activity. We're trying to run away from danger. And we need blood to the muscles. So we only have so much blood, and we're just going to shift it from the gut to the muscles. So therefore, there's not as much blood within the gut, and digestion decreases. So, yeah, anyway. On the somatic side, that's the stuff that we control consciously. So the muscles we voluntarily contract. Speaking of the muscles, muscular system, primary function here, provide movement. Major component is going to be muscle fiber or the muscle cell. And then the three types of muscles: skeletal, which is the stuff that is voluntary, that we can move. The cardiac, only found in the heart. And then the smooth,
I just restarted that.
found mostly in the digestive tract as well as the blood vessels.
If it's dry, just take it upstairs.
Picture of and picture of a muscle cell or fiber. You'll see a picture similar to this in almost every ex-phys book, exercise physiology, maybe kinesiology, definitely anatomy. So the basic unit of that muscle cell is from this red line that I drew to that red line, those jagged lines there, known as Z-discs. So from here to here, and you just got two proteins that are sliding across one another, and that's basically muscle contraction. Simple, very simple, at least from that perspective. But there's some details in there that I'm not going to cover. But here it is blown up. We got the two proteins. We got one right here, little centipede-looking dude, and then we got the helix-looking structure. Those are the two proteins. And, here. And then the division then within the types of muscle fibers, type 1 being more for aerobic, long distance activities, maybe even just everyday activities too. We use these mostly throughout the day, most activities. Walking, even going up and down stairs, writing, typing, whatever it is. And on the type 2 side, these ones are more for heavy lifting or explosive activities. They fatigue a little quicker than type 1. Type 1 is very fatigue resistant. Yeah. Then type 2B is also known as type 2X. That, yeah.
So since like each muscle is made up of different fibers, we want to train like different muscles differently. Like one is made mostly like fast foot, and that's different than like one made of type 2.
It's a good question. Yeah, you're right. Some muscles, well, a lot of muscles, they're going to have variations of type 1. I'll get back in front of the camera. Sorry, guys. So the question was, a lot of the muscles, or most muscles, are going to be made up of multiple different fiber types. So how do you train them? Is that kind of the basis of your question?
Yeah.
It's going to depend upon what you want to do. So if you're looking for, so if you're training for an event that's going to be more anaerobic, train that way. Then if you're wanting to train for aerobic, train that way. The thing about muscle fiber types is, well, two things actually. Type 2A is kind of an intermediate, and that's going to be a pretty good portion of the muscles as well. It can, is that a fire alarm? Should we go? You want to check on that for me? Can you guys hear that? Yeah. No? Oh, false alarm? What's that? Oh, there's a red light on here? I'm gonna check. I'll look. What the heck is going on? Well, we have to break the windows down. Where are we at? Okay, training the muscles, yeah. So type 2A can kind of go either way. So if you're training for aerobic activity, the type 2A can start to mimic what type 1 does. So there's some structures in type 1 that make it type 1, predominantly mitochondria. And if you train for aerobic exercise, type 2A is actually going to gain more mitochondria. So it's going to act more like this one. If you're training for anaerobic, it will shift and start to look a little bit more like type 2X or B. And it'll lose mitochondria, but it'll gain strength capabilities. Yeah.
So like.
Yeah, go ahead.
So like the more you like exercise, like the more the type 2 would like come into play.
Yeah, that one's going to shift a little more. And the other thing too is type 1, if you're training for more anaerobic, it's going to start to shift more this way also. It's not going to lose a lot of mitochondria, but you'll gain a little bit more strength within the type 1 and also gain or lose a little bit of mitochondria. The other thing too is there is a concept, and I'll say this, about 15 years ago-ish, no, not 15, 13, when I first started teaching kind of physiology stuff, changing fiber types was a no-go in humans. Like it did not happen. But we know now under certain types of training, you can actually literally change the actual type of the fiber. To do that, it actually matters about, there's a neuron that's hooking up to these fibers. That's what's actually determining what the fiber is. And you can actually change that through long types of training, meaning that it has to take months to happen. So you can change the fiber types if the training is done properly. You can make them mimic one or the other a little bit more. And part of it also is there's another principle in muscle recruitment that I haven't gone over. Actually, just real quick, we got a little bit of time. Pieces XFIZ, chapter 2. No, it was chapter 1. Hey, the shake weight. There you go. There he is. There we go. All right, so this concept here is known as the size principle motor recruitment. So on the bottom, this is basically representing type 1 muscle fibers. On the top is type 2X. And you can see here, you got the repetition maximum. So 1 RM is your repetition maximum. So how much you can lift at one time. Every movement that we go through is starting with type 1 muscle fibers. It doesn't matter whether it's a massive amount of weight or it's just a low amount of weight. If you're picking up a coffee cup or if you're picking up a car, you're always going to start with type 1 muscle fibers and then move up to type 2 muscle fibers and recruit those. So it's always going to go in that order. Most of the time. So when you're doing those aerobic activities, you're trying to train these ones down here. You may not even hit those ones unless it's intense activity. If you're training for anaerobic, like explosive movements and explosive activities in sports, competition, you can actually teach the body to skip over those smaller muscle or motor units, the type 1 fibers. So they can just skip over them and go straight to the type 2. Yeah?
Would there be like certain muscle groups that are made like more dominantly type 1 than others?
Yes, yes. The question was, are there certain fiber types or certain muscles that are made up of certain fiber types, predominantly type 1 muscle fibers? The rectus abdominis is made up quite a bit of type 1 fibers, so the abs. Maybe a little bit of type 2 muscle fibers in there. The reason why they're made up mostly of type 1 fibers is because we use them consistently throughout the day. So we need to be able to have fatigue-resistant abs to basically keep us upright. The same thing with some of our back muscles is we're constantly, and this is an exaggeration, but we're constantly walking around like this throughout the day. We are contracting muscles in our core, our abs, back muscles, lower back muscles, and also our obliques to keep us upright, keep us steady, and keep us from falling over. So a lot of those muscles are definitely going to be more type 1 fibers, yeah. Some of the muscles, even within the legs, and some of the smaller ones around the hip that are helping to stabilize the hip, hip and pelvis, and the knee, because we're using those constantly. Yeah. So, good question. Good stuff to get into. Yeah, oh man, I love that stuff. While I'm in here, discard this. While I'm in here, I will show you muscle contraction. You can look up YouTube videos of muscular contraction. There's some awesome videos and animations, but this is a fairly simple one. But that's muscular contraction. Bam! Doesn't look like muscular contraction, but this is what's happening at a very small level. We have the head of one protein that is attaching to the body of another and just pulling it towards the middle, towards the center of that short little portion of the muscle known as the sarcomere. You got different pieces here that we won't go into, but there you go. Kind of getting back to the muscles and what fiber types they're made out of. Some of that is also going to depend upon your genetics. In fact, that's a big component of almost everything in our bodies. Well, pretty much everything in our bodies. How much fiber types we have, of which ones, and also if we tend to be more aerobic or anaerobic, just in nature. For instance, let me give an example. If both of your parents were power lifters, you're probably going to be genetically predisposed to being more anaerobic in nature. So sports or activities that are more anaerobic are probably going to be better suited for your body. If both of your parents were marathon runners, probably going to be more aerobic. Probably going to have maybe a little bit more type 1 muscle fibers also. There's actually a famous quote within the field. I can't remember if it's still on my window in my office or not, but I used to have it. There was a guy, it was an exercise physiologist by the name of Astrand, and he said that if you want to be a world-class athlete, choose your parents wisely. Genetics plays a major role in your peak levels that you could possibly get to. It's a very important component. Good stuff. Good stuff, guys. Good questions. God, I love getting into that stuff. It's fun. I geek out. Okay, skeletal muscle, or skeletal system. Provides a framework, protecting the organs, tissues, the rib cage being an example of this. Skull. Provides a lever system. The muscles will attach to the bones at different parts and just provide levers for us to move. Storage of minerals, some of those minerals, calcium, phosphorus, magnesium. We have the bone cells themselves, the osteocytes. And in the bone marrow, we're going to create some red blood cells. Disease, serious condition for the bones would be osteoporosis. And the deterioration of the bone mineral density. So the top picture is going to be what a bone maybe looks like normally, and then at the bottom you have what it looks like if it's diseased, and we're taking away some of that material. And some of that's going to be going to the muscles for muscular contraction. I think I mentioned that last time. The definition for osteoporosis is actually somewhat general. It is a decrease in bone density to which there is an increased risk for fracture. It doesn't give us a very finite description, but there is a way to actually measure this. There's a scan that you can have done. There's a DEXA scan. It's essentially like an MRI, X-ray scan, but it's not an MRI machine. It's similar technology, but you're actually in a nice big table, and you can lay down nice and comfortable. You're not in a tube, or you're just kind of claustrophobic and squeezed in there. But it measures bone density. It can measure body fat, muscle mass. And there's also another condition before somebody gets to osteoporosis, and it's known as osteopenia. So it's lower bone density, but it's not quite osteoporosis. It's of concern, but not quite the full osteoporosis. The good thing about one of the good things about osteoporosis is that as long as there is nothing else that is causing this deterioration other than nutrition or physical activity or physical inactivity, it can be reversed. So better nutrition, maybe supplementation of some of those minerals, but also weight-bearing exercises. You need to be able to put stress on the bones for them to be able to react, to keep themselves strong, keep their structure in place. What the astronauts have on the space station have certain pieces of equipment to be able to stress their bodies, their muscles and their bones. If you spend a year or more in space, you're going to probably lose some muscle, or well, you're probably lose some muscle mass, but you'll lose bone density as well. So we need gravity. We need gravity. All right, new stuff. All right, so finally, new stuff for half hour in advance. Cardiovascular system. Primary functions here, we're transporting oxygen. That's the big one. That's the good stuff. Arguably, probably the most important, but all the other ones are very important as well. Nutrients. So everything that we eat is going to be absorbed somewhere in the digestive tract, and it's going to be absorbed into the bloodstream, and it's going to go to certain tissues. It could be stored, could be used for building purposes of bones, muscles, other tissues. And then it could be actually brought back to the bloodstream and transported somewhere else then. Any hormones that are being released electrolytes, drugs, recreational or otherwise. What are electrolytes? Big industry, actually. Electrolyte companies like Powerade, Gatorade, they have made billions of dollars off of electrolytes. So the big ones, trying to do it. Chloride, sodium, potassium. And the reason they are electrolytes, I'm thinking I'm getting these correct. Is they have certain charges to them. And they are going to be important in metabolic processes as well as the nervous system. They are also lost when we sweat. So that's the purpose of Gatorade or some type of recovery drink or replenishment drink, in that we're losing certain minerals, and then also we're losing maybe some sugar in our bodies, we're burning it, and it's replenishing it. So when we lose electrolytes through the sweat, we need to replenish it. That's why sweat can taste a little salty, because we have sodium and chloride. That's a lot of times why dogs and cats will lick us. Maybe not because they love us, but because we taste good. Also because they might love us too. Maybe. Or your cat is just getting a pre-taste for when he does murder you. That's what cats do all day. They think about how they can kill their owners. Yep. Also, the cardiovascular system removes the waste products that we are producing. Anytime we are using oxygen to go through metabolic processes to get energy, we are also going to be producing carbon dioxide. That needs to be removed. We're also going to be producing some waste products that the body can kind of take care of itself. Maybe takes somewhere else and it gets converted into another product. It can also be taken to the kidneys and then into the bladder, and we can urinate it out. It can also go the other way and be released as a solid, feces. Or shit, if you prefer that term. Primary component, heart, blood vessels. The blood itself is the fluid medium. And there's other things in the blood. So there are blood cells, red blood cells, being important for oxygen transport. And something we've already seen is the cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death, at least in the United States. Questions? Questions on it? No? All right, little picture here of the cardiovascular system as a whole. Again, it's not structured exactly like this, It'd be kind of weird. But the path. If you notice on the right side of the heart, the blood is a little darker. It's got a brownish, tan, reddish color. Why is that? Versus the left side, which looks a little more pink. Yeah.
Going out of the heart.
Yeah, it's going down the heart, going to where? I guess you can kind of see it. It's going to the lungs.
I was just thinking because, like, since it's going out of the heart, it's already been through the process, and then it's like blood going the left side.
For which side again?
The left side.
Okay, the left side.
Right.
Okay, yeah. So on the left side, I mean, it's, I guess, it is going out. It's going out to the lungs. So if it's coming in from the rest of the body, so from like down here, it's coming up, coming in to the bottom and top of the heart. It is going out at one point. It's going to the lungs. Why is it going to the lungs? It kind of has to do with maybe what you were thinking of.
I can't.
It's going to the lungs. Yeah, that thing's kind of loud. Sorry. It's going to the lungs. Why do you think it's going to the lungs? So from here, let me draw it up here. Sorry. This little path. So it's coming in. You got one there. You got there, and then it's. So you're going to the right lung, and then it's also another branch is going over here to the left lung. Why do you think it's going to the lungs?
Probably because it's been through the heart. I don't know.
Yeah, it's been through the heart. The heart's accepting this blood that's coming from the body. When we breathe in, what are we breathing in?
Oxygen.
Oxygen, a good portion of oxygen. That's why the blood's going to the lungs. It's trying to pick up the oxygen. It's trying to drop off carbon dioxide that it has picked up from like muscles and tissues that it's flowed through. So on this side, it's actually a little bit lower oxygen content than the left side. The reason for that is this stuff on the right side, it's been through all of these other tissues and it's dropped off oxygen. But at the same time, it's picked up some waste, and the biggest waste product it's picked up is carbon dioxide. That's why it tends to look a little bit darker. Sometimes you'll see it on the right, on the left side, red, like really bright red, and then on the right side, it's like dark blue, maybe like a light blue. And that's probably where some of the confusion is. I don't know why they picked this color, because most of the time it's red and blue. Even though it doesn't necessarily look like that, it actually looks probably a little bit more like this in the body. But so the right side has this kind of deoxygenated or low oxygen level blood. On the left side has the high oxygen content. High oxygen concentration. Then that's going out through the body. This system also relies not only on physiology, but also on physics. Because at this portion right here, and also kind of up here, so you have, there's actually just one part where the blood is coming in. It's known as the vena cava, this blood vein. It's actually going back to the heart. Right there at the opening, the pressure is about 0. Maybe 1 millimeter of mercury. But, where am I? Right in here, in this blood vessel, that is the aorta. And the pressure at that point is well over 300 millimeters of mercury. So it's similar to blood pressure. So everything is going from a high pressure to a very low pressure. That's how the blood flows. So the heart is essentially just creating a pump, a pressure system through pumping. That's all it's doing. It's also why it's easily replicated, and we're able to actually make a device that acts like a heart, because all it does is pump fluid. It's going to be very difficult for us to create, I'm sure at some point in the coming centuries, we might create organs, 3D printing, who knows? But it's going to be difficult for us to recreate the liver or lungs that actually go through metabolic processes for their functioning. The heart just does an action. That's all it does. So this is going to be much easier to create something that's fake. Not necessarily fake, but it's not natural, I guess. So, anyway, just side notes on that. Oh my goodness. Okay. Speaking of which, on the heart, lungs, so those lungs are used for picking up oxygen. Also, we need to get rid of carbon dioxide. So we're moving air in and out of the lungs. This helps to aid in acid-base balance. So as we become physically active, even a little bit at rest, we're creating some acidic properties within the blood. In helping to breathe out, exhale, we're getting rid of some of that acidity. The lungs also do not expand and contract on their own. There's some elastic properties to them that allow them to expand and go down to a smaller size. But they are reliant also upon pressure in physics. So everything goes from a high pressure to a low pressure. When you are exhaling, you are squeezing the chest cavity or the thoracic cavity. And you're creating an increased pressure within the lungs. And that pressure becomes greater than the pressure in the surrounding air around you. Thus, the air then flows from the lungs to the surrounding air. The opposite occurs when you are breathing in. When you're breathing in, you start that process, you start to expand the chest cavity. When you expand the chest cavity, it creates a vacuum and a lower pressure than what is on the outside of your body. Thus, the air then flows from a high pressure from the outside into the lungs. It's a pretty simple process, actually. The lungs, they're kind of moochers. They need other things for their functioning to happen. Mostly muscles. There are muscles on the rib cage, known as the intercostals, that help with this, either for expansion or compression of the chest cavity. You also have the rectus abdominis helping with that, and the diaphragm are the big ones that help either expand or put pressure on the chest cavity so that we can get air in and out of the lungs. This is sometimes the same thing with the muscular system and also the skeletal system are combined into the skeletal muscular system or the musculoskeletal system. This a lot of times is combined with the cardiovascular system, and it's sometimes referred to as the cardiopulmonary system. hopefully you're starting to see how a lot of these things interact. The cardiovascular and the pulmonary is somewhat obvious, the muscular and the skeletal, somewhat obvious. But even in the skeletal, we create the red blood cells there and going around to the cardiovascular system. And that's also going to be part of the pulmonary system, getting oxygen in and out and carrying the oxygen around. But also the muscular system is necessary for this process to even take place. So all of it is important, and all of it needs to interact with one another for smooth operation. If one of these components goes down, we're probably going to have some problems. Case in point, if you've ever had a major, stress on certain muscles, maybe your abs, or maybe a back muscle, or maybe you just got hit in the ribs by a baseball, it's tough to breathe. It's because those muscles aren't working properly, so you're laboring a little bit more. Now, part of that is because it's somewhat painful, but also because the muscles might not actually be functioning properly to help with the expansion and compression of the chest cavity. So, problems all around. So, questions? Another picture here of this one of the pulmonary system. We'll pay a little more attention down here. Right there is where the gas exchange will occur. You can see the blood vessels that are going across those little sacs. Those are known as alveoli, which always makes me hungry. It makes me think of ravioli. Nothing better than Italian food in a can. It's the greatest invention ever. Anyway, that's where the gas exchange goes. The oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange. See, in this case, it was blue and red. I don't know why it was dark or like a brownish red and pink in the other one. But same thing applies. The blue is the blue is representative of low oxygen blood, and then red is oxygenated blood. Digestive system. Moving on. Primary component here, or primary function, excuse me, transfer of nutrients and any other thing that we consume, water being a big one. Even a lot of the foods that we eat, a good portion of it is water, especially fruits, vegetables. But anything we drink, anything we eat, going through this system. Primary component, organs, everything in the digestive tract. So that big long tube. One interesting thing here about the digestive system is looking at gastric emptying. If something is consumed, either a drink or a food, meal, and it has 6% solution or percentage of it is made up of carbohydrates or less, it's going to flow from the stomach into the small intestine fairly quickly. If it is greater than this, and then that even much greater, 40%, 50% carbohydrates, it's going to take a little while for it to empty from the stomach into the small intestine. Once it gets into the small intestine, that's what we want. That's where a lot of the good stuff's going to be absorbed. But if it just stays in the stomach, it can't be used. So it can just sit there. This comes into play, importantly, maybe if you're just resting and you're not active, probably not a big deal. I mean, you might feel full, especially if it's a large consumption of it. Like if it's a massive plate of spaghetti, or if you eat like a spaghetti bowl with like the big bread bowl, like that's gonna fill you up, gonna make you bloated. But during physical activity, if you're trying to replenish some carbohydrates, if it's more than a 6% solution, it's going to take a little while for it to empty. But if it's less, it's going to move through fairly quickly. You're going to be able to absorb those carbohydrates or the sugar and be able to use it for energy. The last thing you want while you're trying to still exercise, maybe it's a marathon, at some point you're going to need to replenish and refuel some of the carbohydrates that you're losing. But if you take in too much at one time, then it could just sit there and maybe even not empty for a long time. So not only are you not using it, now you can have a belly full of stuff. You could start to get a little wheezy, a little nauseous. So that's during physical activity. Anybody know what some of the preferred energy drink is, or at least recovery drink after a long duration competition, such as a marathon or a bike race? Probably one of the most promoted recovery drinks. Yeah. Yeah, chocolate milk. Chocolate milk is preferred. And that has to deal with a little bit of this, but it has to deal with there's a good, excuse me, a good combination and ratio of fats, carbohydrates, and protein. So using the fats for fuel, the carbohydrates for recovery, and also protein for recovery, as well as building up of tissues that you've had damaged during that physical activity. Gatorade has also kind of gotten into this market as well. They've come out with it's been out a while, but it's like Gatorade chocolate milk type stuff. It actually came in an aluminum can. Has anyone ever tried it? Bought it? Anyone on virtual room tried it? Yeah. A couple people in the other section said that they tried it and it was disgusting. I've had it, but it's been a while. I remember they had vanilla and chocolate. At least last I checked. At least that's the stuff that I've tried. The chocolate, what I remember, wasn't bad, but vanilla was like, look, it was kind of icky. Yeah. I don't know. I believe you can buy it. It's fairly expensive. My buddy bought a case of it in college, and I think it was, at the time, like $3.50, maybe $4 a can, for like an 8 or 12 ounce can. Like, they're not very big either. So it's almost like trying to get a beer at a ball game. Any questions on that, on the digestive tract system? And there's a picture of it that we've all probably seen at some point. There. All right, that'll be it for today. We will come back and finish this chapter up on Friday. Start off with the endocrine system. And we got the sign-up sheet then up front here. Everyone is, any questions online? Okay. No? Participants. call to the neighbors. And I think everyone's good to go. So, see you guys.